Тише, я. О, спасибо. Вернул. Да. Угу. Кандидат. Понял. Такое для пения. Точно. Нет, не точно. Что-то, да. Как же и там? Зак, там, Зейдлер, да? Чечены. Не ручит. Да, Зейдлер. Очень красивая музыка. Понимаете, ну, не важно. Ну да. Ну да. Типа того. Так зачем, если оно и так получается? Рот открываешь и петь начинаешь, и все. Ну, значит, тебе надо учиться. Как будешь учиться? Будешь то же самое делать. Ладно, не кстати. Ну, не надо знать, не надо ничего. Ну, вот это он имеет в виду. Вот школа пения? Это... Нет, это просто... Ну, вот, просто потому что прикольно, нравится. Это, да, классика, масса. Да. Да, там всяких физитур, ну, не важно. Там есть что послушать. Ну, да, не важно, так. Ну, наоборот, наоборот, ну пусть чуть-чуть помоги, да, ну надо, ну да, ну будет, да, обожжет. Ладно, поехал. Все нормально. Опоздание, опоздало. Ну да. где все уже было. Было. Хризантемы. Ой, заду. Ну это имеется в виду. Ну да. Ну это есть. Ну. Вон она. Вон глаза видите. Ну вот это есть детская. Малыша. Я на больнице. Маленькая. Ну да. Что это интересно? Ну, я понял. Животное. Да, слушаю.
День. Меня зовут Анна. Уделите мне пару минут. Спешим вас подать. Вы ранее пользовались услугами платежных систем MasterCard и Visa и хотите благодарить.
Ну да. Типа это он это имел в виду, да. Лох-лох-лох-лох. Наоборот, да, наоборот. Мошенники. Шеф-повар. Шеф-повар? Ну, да. Да. Ладно. Не надо было громко питаться. Громко такие. Что-то я не понял. Не понял, да. Не понял. Oh, Chiponics. Чем? Ну ладно. Do this. Hey, do this. Do this.
Okay, so this morning what we're going to be dealing with is the question of the development of the piano, really from the time of Mozart through Beethoven, through Chopin, and through Liszt up to the modern grand piano that you see in front of us. And we'll end with a guest performer. Dan Schlossberg will be coming in about 11 o'clock, and we'll be talking to Dan at that point. We start with Mozart because he was the first composer to switch from the harpsichord over to the piano. The harpsichord was the primary instrument, of course, of the Baroque period, as we said before, 1600 to 1750. Now, our first slide that we see on the screen this morning is a Dutch harpsichord, comes from the Low Countries, of the 17th century. It's actually in our own collection of historical musical instruments at 17 Hill House Avenue. And many of the slides that we will be seeing today come from that particular collection. So if you ever happen to be sick and going over to DUH, right next to DUH on this side of the railroad tracks, or the canal there, is this splendid collection of keyboard instruments. You got a chance, I believe, in section last time to deal with the harpsichord and perhaps even play the harpsichord. And you remember that it produces this kind of tinkling, jangling effect, right? So if you ever hear a tingling, jangling keyboard instrument on a test, what are you going to say about musical style? What period does it come from? Daniel? Baroque, okay? So that's a good key. It's one of the fingerprints for Baroque music. But young Mozart here, about 1770 to 1780, he came to prefer the piano because what was the one limitation, or a central limitation, of the harpsichord? What was the problem, in essence, with the harpsichord? Nice and loud. Kristen, isn't it? I can hardly see back there. Kristen, nice and loud? No dynamics, okay? Basically, you get one dynamic level. Yeah, you can throw some levers and maybe bring some more strings in, but it's cumbersome. You can't shade a scale. You can't reach for a climax. It's not only dynamics, it's shading that's also very important there. So people began to switch over to this thing called the pianoforte. Originally, it was all one word, pianoforte, the loud soft, or the soft loud, pianoforte, so that there could be gradations of sound. And this was an instrument invented in Florence around 1700. Actually, we know the name of the person that did it, Bartolomeo Cristofori. I didn't put that up on the board, but that's what happened in Florence around 1700, and it took about 50 years or so before this to kind of catch on, this invention to catch on, and gradually replace the harpsichord. But notice that when we have our first pianos, that they look virtually identical to the harpsichord. Here is a harpsichord from our collection. Here is a piano of the sort that Mozart would have played about 1770. So it's not that much bigger, right? Go back and forth quickly, if you would, Jacob. There's the harpsichord, and there's the piano. And as said, Mozart was the first significant composer to switch from the harpsichord to the piano. Mozart, of course, came from the city of Salzburg, Austria, and he was an employee, a sort of disgruntled employee of the Archbishop of Salzburg. He referred to the Archbishop as the Archbooby. And Mozart is thought to be a composer who worked at the piano. And indeed, so was Joseph Haydn, Mozart's contemporary and dear, dear friend. It's Mozart that first called Haydn Papa Haydn. So let's go on to 2 slides. We've got a couple to skip, and here is Haydn. He's composing, thinking things through at a keyboard, and here is Mozart working at a keyboard. But Mozart actually didn't compose at a keyboard. Why is he then seated at a keyboard? To show that he's a musician. You need an icon to associate it with. When Mozart composed, you know where he did most of his composing? Some of it at a billiard table, but most of it in bed. His sister tells us that, and his wife tells us that. He would get up in the morning, and he would just stay in bed. He had this kind of desk with ink trays and sand and stuff to block the paper, and he would work in bed from about 7 to 10 in the morning. He didn't need a piano. He heard it all in his head. In any event, 1781, Mozart has had it with the Archbooby of Salzburg. He breaks free of him and establishes himself as a freelance musician in the city of Vienna. This was kind of a risky gambit, to be a freelance musician. We have 2 freelance musicians in our midst today, Santana and Jacob. How is it, Santana, being a freelance musician? Busy. What do you have to do? Run around to different gigs, right? Trying to patch together a living as best you can until you work your way up to a more secure position. Same thing, I'm sure, with Jacob. Well, what did Mozart do when he got to Vienna then? How was he going to patch together a living? He did it through two ways. One, he was going to give piano lessons to the aristocracy, going to give piano lessons to the aristocracy, and 2, he was going to play the piano in public concerts, teacher, performer. And as a result of this, he perfected or contributed greatly to 2 important genres in the history of music, those genres being the piano sonata. We've talked about the sonata, usually 3 movements. Those he wrote mostly for his pupils. And then the piano concerto. Mozart wrote 23 original piano concertos. The piano concerto, which he wrote principally for himself as a kind of showpiece for public concerts. And you will be watching in section beginning this evening a wonderful video of the performance of the great D minor piano concerto of Mozart. Mozart's piano concertos are much more difficult than his sonatas. He intended these piano concertos for him himself, I guess so, for him, yeah, to play. And he did so, interestingly enough, at this public hall that was located in the casino in Vienna. Here's a picture of that casino, which today is actually it's this building to the right there, the tallest one. It's a big building, and it had a big public space in it, and that's where he performed. It still exists, that building still exists. It's the Ambassador Hotel in downtown, in the Neumarkt Platz there in Vienna. Why did Mozart play in a casino? I was driving down the highway the other day and I saw a sign up there, Usher at Mohegan Sun. My wife thought this might be a Poe play, but who is Usher? Rap artist? He's a musician, right? No? Who's Usher? Come on, guys. Okay, Frederick, nice and loud, please. An R&B singer, but he's playing the casinos because that's where the money is, okay? That's where the money is. That's where the crowd is, that's where the money is. And Mozart's piano would only be one. It's much smaller in a number. Typical, I think we talked about that before, the tuning kind of floated around up until really the 20th century when it got fixed that A should be 440 vibrations per second. So that's Mozart's own piano. What did you think about the sound of it? Any adjectives there? Somebody tell me something about the sound of Mozart's piano. Play the beginning again. Are you still there on that one? Okay. Give me 2 adjectives about this sound. Someone give me, shout out an adjective. Sarah? Shallow. Okay, it doesn't have a lot of resonance. It does not have, it's not a big, rich sound. So the sound dissipates very quickly because there's not a lot of resonators around that instrument. So we'll take shallow. Give me another adjective. Roger. Pungent. Okay, kind of sharp. Pungent, you said? Punchy. Oh, I like that even better. Punchy. Yes. And I put the word up there, staccato, as opposed to legato. Mozart's piano does not lend itself to legato lines, these lines that are tied together. Think of your ligature, right? It's all etymologically related to the word legare, I suppose. So in legato, smooth, connected. But that's not the sound that we get in Mozart's piano. We get this staccato, as Roger says, punchy sound. So, and it's because the hammers are actually made of leather, kind of hard leather, rather than felt. In the 19th century, they put felt on these hammers, and it kind of smooths it out a bit. It makes it less punchy. So those are a couple of characteristics of Mozart's piano. It tends to encourage fast staccato playing. All right, 1791, Mozart dies. Beethoven had been originally sent to Vienna to study with Mozart, but then there were family problems. His mother died back in Bonn, so he had to go back and kind of look after the family. Beethoven, like Mozart, was a pianist, but unfortunately for Beethoven, his teacher was his father, a somewhat unscrupulous individual who tried to pass off the rather short Beethoven as being 2 years younger than he actually was. Why would he want to do that? Well, oftentimes you get kids, you know, if you cut off in particular 12 and under soccer or USTA tennis, you're supposed to, you can't be 16 before that particular date, and people try to sneak over the other side of it. Well, because in terms of the music of Beethoven here, the father wanted the son to be the next Wunderkind, right? The next child prodigy, the next Mozart. Why? Because money was to be made in that fashion. The Mozart family had certainly made enough of it that way. But eventually, Beethoven broke free of this tyrannical environment in Bonn and established himself permanently in Vienna. Think about it, Bonn is at the very west end of the German-speaking lands. Vienna is off toward the east end of the German-speaking lands. So he went all the way to the other side of it, but Vienna, of course, was the musical capital of the world at that particular point. So here is what Beethoven, young Beethoven, looked like when he arrived in Vienna permanently about 1797. Forget it. I forgot that slide, but it doesn't matter. Let's look at Beethoven here. Here's young Beethoven, and here is middle-aged Beethoven when he is writing things such as the 8th Symphony that we heard at the JE concert. So we have Beethoven young, Beethoven middle-aged, and Beethoven dead. Okay, that's Beethoven's death mass. The only reason I mention this is that it was drawn by Joseph Dannhäuser, who also was the artist who painted the cover of your textbook. We'll come back to that just a little bit later. So when Beethoven, that's too ghoulish. Let's go back to Beethoven looking a little better there. I like that better, don't you? So with that vision of Beethoven on the screen, let's make the point that when he arrived in Vienna, he sort of astonished the aristocracy by the power of his playing, the aggressive nature of it, the physicality of it, the virtuosity of it. It was much more technical than anything that Mozart had ever created on the piano. And in part because gradually in this period, the piano itself was getting bigger and more powerful. So here is, let's move on now, over Beethoven's body here, and over to this piano, which again comes from our own collection of musical instruments. It's a Kernigha piano of about, I think we know exactly, 1799, and it was made in Vienna 2 doors down the street from where that casino was. That's where the Kernigha shop was in Vienna. So this is the kind of instrument that Beethoven would have played when he first arrived in Vienna. It's a little bit bigger. It's got a few more keys added to it. Then in 1817, Beethoven Well, let's move to the next slide. I want to show this to you just for a moment. Does this look like something from the early 19th century? Picture of Beethoven? Actually not. It was created in the 1920s, not 1820s, but 1920s. It's a fanciful representation of Beethoven and his musical study there, with papers all around. You see the ear trumpets on either side. He's growing deaf. You see his bowl of coffee or porridge or whatever on the keyboard. I'm interested here particularly in the piano, because what do we have back there coming out of the piano? A lot of broken strings, okay? And that's kind of important because when he played, he would frequently break strings. Here, let's move on to the next slide. It's also something of a fanciful representation of Beethoven's room with the idea of the moonlight and the Moonlight Sonata behind it, but it contains as a piano an illustration of a Broadwood piano. In 1817, the maker Broadwood gave Beethoven a free instrument. Why would somebody do that? Aren't these pianos expensive? Let's go on to, I think I have a shot of another one. This is not fanciful. This is Beethoven's actual instrument. It is preserved today. It was purchased after Beethoven's death by Franz Liszt, the famous pianist, and taken ultimately to Budapest. And you can go into, I did this 2 summers ago, you can go into the National Museum there in Budapest, and it's actually in Pest, and see this particular instrument. So it still survives. And as you can see, it's getting bigger and more powerful. But why would this maker, English maker Broadwood, give Beethoven a free instrument? These are expensive. What? Nice and loud. Probably what? Publicity, yeah. A celebrity endorsement, right? Why does Tiger Woods drive a Buick? You think he really wants to drive a Buick? Okay. But nonetheless, in TV commercials, he's seen driving a Buick, a celebrity endorsement, and we'll be talking a little more about that. So this is Beethoven's Broadwood here, 1817, still existing today. Let's listen to